Are back to part 4 of the life of Saint Anthony. Last part we spoke about the demons. He was a little bit more meaty. He spoke about all their ways, how to defeat them, what they do first, what they do second, so on and so forth. Now, this part also a little bit about the demon, a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit easier, but still quite beautiful. Today we're going to go over this, the next 10 chapters or so. So picking up with paragraph 31, it says, "Wherefore, if they being the demons, they pretend to foretell the future, let no one give heed. For often they announce beforehand that the brethren are coming days after. And they do come." And so when I first read that, I was taken aback because it was always something that we were taught, is that the demons cannot tell the future. They have no control, or they have no way of telling what's going to happen in the future. So here, why is he telling if they tell the future? Then I realized that he's saying if they pretend to tell the future. Later on, we're going to find what he's actually talking about. So he says, if they pretend to tell the future, let no one give heed. If they announce that someone's coming beforehand, and he comes days later, right? The demons, however, they do this not from any care for the hearers, but to gain their trust, and then at length, having got them in their power, they may destroy them. He speaks about this, or he spoke about this before, just like when we talked about the interpretation as to why Christ rebuked the devil, who often said, "You are Christ, the Son of God." And he says he does this lest they gain any sort of credibility or any sort of authority that later on they misuse. And so here, moving on, whence we must give no heed to them, but ought rather to confute them when speaking, since we do not need them. For what wonder is it if with more subtle bodies than men have, when they have seen them start their journey, they surpass them in speed and announce their coming. So here he's saying, well, if demons cannot tell the future, how come when sometimes they say that, for example, someone's coming, and of course they're in the desert, and so when the demons appear to Saint Anthony and say, this monk is coming from here to there, and he comes later on, how can people truly believe that they cannot tell the future? Well, he says simply, when they see someone leaving, they go because they're not limited by a body. They are spirits, so they go much faster and announce that they're going to come beforehand by simply saying that they're going or taking up or starting the road which leads to somewhere else. Just as a horseman getting a start of a man on foot announces the arrival of the latter beforehand. So in this, there is no need for us to wonder at them. This is how they know the future, by simply assuming that the person who's taking the direction from this city to this city, of course roads were a lot less complicated, and of course dealing with the monks a lot less complicated in that way. For they know none of those things which are not yet in existence. So here St. Anthony clarifies what we have been taught and what we know, and of course this is dating back to the writing of St. Athanasius in the 4th century. So he's confirming that the devil and the demons do not know what does not exist, what is not in existence. But God only is he who knows all things before their birth. But these, like thieves, the devils, the demons, running off first with what they see, proclaim it. To how many already have they announced our business, that we are assembled together? Remember, this is the part where St. Anthony's sitting with a group of monks after he had been a monk for about 20 years or so in the desert, and now he's starting to have disciples, and so they all came to learn from him. They all came and they all sat down to learn from him. So they all sat down, and he talked to them before about that. He mentioned how weak the demons are, that even though all the monks are gathered together in one place, they are still unable to do anything. They're still too weak to do anything. So he's saying, like thieves running off first with what they see, proclaim it. To how many already they have announced our business, that we are assembled together and discuss measures against them, before any one of us could go and tell these things. This, in good truth, a fleet-footed boy could do, getting far ahead of one less swift. But what I mean is this: if anyone begins to walk from Thebaid or from any other district, before he begins to walk, they do not know whether he will walk. Before he begins to walk, they do not know whether he will walk, which means they do not know the inner thoughts of people. They can only see someone beginning to walk from this road to this road, or on the road that leads to this city, and they assume that he will reach this place. But as it says here, but when they have seen him walking, they run on, and before he comes up, report his approach. And so it falls out that after a few days the travelers arrive. But often the walkers turn back and the demons prove to be false. If the person changes his mind and turns around in the middle, the prophecy or the fake pretending that they had said, of course it's proven false because it does not happen. This reminds me, actually, I was translating one of the lectures with the evangelism team with Abuna Daoud Lamay, and one of the speakers spoke about his personal experience with something similar to this. You see, any pretending or foretelling the future is all gonna be based on intelligence, whether or wit or cunning, whether human intelligence or that, if we can say, of the demons. What do I mean about this? So the story goes is that this person is in a country in Africa, I think it was Ghana, and he is looking for the possibility to start medical missions in that country, part of the Coptic Church. And so he's speaking. He meets a charismatic movement, which is this dangerous movement that highlights certain things and not all the gospel, and that oftentimes play on the emotions of people by hyping up or pretending to know or to foretell the future. And the way they do it is that, for example, when this servant shared the information with one of the servants of one of the team members of that charismatic movement, they shared this information with their head preacher. And so when they were invited to a meeting, the preacher pretended that he was telling the future by singling them out, telling them what they're here for, telling them what they're doing, so on and so forth. And this is hyping up the crowd as if this preacher is knowing this through some sort of the spirit or some sort of just a gift, when in fact he was given all this information by someone that they had shared this information with, and they know this, until to the point that he called them doctors, and they're not doctors, but they were looking to start medical missions. And so the person who took their information assumed that they were doctors when they were not. And so when he called them doctors and they said we're not, this kind of embarrassed them. And so that person that they had shared the information with then confronts them and tells them, you told us that you're here, that you're doctors. And they clarified. They said, no, we told you we're here looking for the possibility of establishing a medical mission. And so this proves how it is often through cunning and through intelligence, much like what we see here St. Anthony talk about of humans or even of the demons. He talked about as the demons using logic and assumption, seeing someone take up a road and start walking on this road that leads from this city to this city, and then going and telling the people by the way someone is coming, as if they are telling the future, when in fact they're only assuming and operating on something that they had already seen. Moving on, 32, we're going to pretty much continue in this paragraph along the same thought. He says, so too with respect to the water of the river, they sometimes make foolish statements, for having seen that there has been much rain in the regions of Ethiopia, and knowing that they are the cause of the flood. Of course, Africa had the rainy season and the dry season, and the Nile used to flood often, of course, before they built the dams of Egypt, and now that's not an issue anymore. But it used to be something that was quite volatile and changing. And so here he's speaking in respect to the assumption or foretelling or pretending to foretell the future in regards to the how much flooding is going to be in the river, or the even the level of the water in the river. When here he says simply they are able to see how much rain has been in the region of Ethiopia, and then based on that they make this assumption, trying to pretend they're foretelling the future. So again, with respect to the water of the river, which is the Nile, they sometimes make foolish statements, for having seen that there has been much rain in the regions of Ethiopia, and knowing that there are the cause of the flood of the river before the water has come to Egypt, they run on and announce it, right? And the whole point, as we said before, is that they gain favor in order to misuse that trust later on, or misuse that credibility later on in something. And there was a verse that we spoke about the man who gives his neighbor a muddy drink in that way. So he uses his relationship as a neighbor, or his friendship as a neighbor, for his friendliness, in order to later on pass something that is muddy, or or in different translations, it could be poisoned, or something that will cause someone to be ill. So they are the cause of the flood of the river before the water has come to Egypt, and they announce it. This men could have told if they had as great power of running as demons. Anyone, of course, now in the age of the internet and all the monitoring, now we're able to recognize many of these things, or we're able to see different data points, or hear different news from different places. So, this, of course, would be pointless. But as David's spy, now this was in 2 Samuel 18:24. As David's spy, going up to a lofty place, saw the man approaching better than one who stayed down below, and the forerunner himself announced before the others came up, not those things which had not taken place, but those things which were already on the way and were being accomplished. So there also preferred to labor. So what is this whole thing talking about? When you go back and read 2 Samuel chapter 18, this is the chapter where they tell David that his son Absalom had passed away in the battle. Well, what is it talking about specifically? Well, there were three characters in that chapter. There was first the watchman on the roof, right? And then there was a messenger running, and then there was another messenger. The watchman on the roof saw one messenger run, and he said, if it's one person running, it must be good news. So he yelled out to the king, it's going to be good news. And then later on, we sees another person running behind him, and he says, oh, wait a second, there's going to be bad news. And so it happened that he delivered both before they actually came to King David. Although, as St. Anthony or St. Athanasius is explaining here, is that it was not the fact that the watchman was able to bring the good news. He was not the one responsible for it, nor was he the one to wish it, or to order it, or to affect it. He was only the one to report on something that had already taken place, and he had no credit in either news. When the first news was that they won the battle, the second bad news is that his son passed away. Absalom had passed away. So that's what he's talking about here in 2 Samuel, and he's saying that the demons operate like that watchman who simply sees the news and something that is already happening, something that he did not do, he does not control, nor is it something that he foretells before it happened. It had already happened, and he simply takes the credit by saying it first before the messenger who was running was able to come inside the palace. But those things which were already on the way and were being accomplished, so these also prefer to labor. And declare what is happening to others simply for the sake of deceiving them. If, however, Providence, capital P, meantime plans anything different for the waters or wayfarers, for Providence can do this. The demons are deceived, and those who gave heed to them cheat. Of course, if God changes the course of anything, or if the person by himself, comes back, or if God intervenes in any way, then whatever they had pretended to know or to tell does not come in place, and they are known to be liars in that way. And so here St. Anthony affirms to us what we have been taught is that the demons do not have the power to tell the future. Later on, he will speak to us a little bit more about how to know when this apparition is a holy apparition and when this apparition is not. What feelings are going to be present in both cases. I apologize, I don't have the text highlighted going forward. Highlighted it, but it never saved. So we'll try to read slowly together. So paragraph 33 says, "Thus in days gone by arose the oracles of the Greeks, and thus they were led astray by the demons. But thus also thenceforth their deception, from that time on, their deception was brought to an end by the coming of the Lord." He speaks that the oracles, many times in the Old Testament, God would give very strict rules about the Gentiles. And he would say, you shall never have any relationship with the oracles or the soothsayers or the people that foretell the future or the witches. I mean, there are many words for them and many different things throughout history. But God strictly instructs his children, the children of Israel in the Old Testament, never to associate or to deal with such people, because as St. Anthony tells us, is they were often led by the demons. Either, as we said, two things: the person is using intelligence, or the person is truly in communication with the demons. And this is known quite extensively about the people, even today, about the people that read the palms and pretend to speak to the dead or foretell the future and all that kind of stuff. They often use trickeries, or they are truly led by the devil and the demons. And thus also thenceforth the reception was brought to an end by the coming of the Lord. Of course, we cannot comprehend, because we live in a grace. We live in the New Testament, we live in a time where the majority of the world is Christian. We live in a time where we are blessed to be living in this time, although it was not such. So in the time before Christianity, or in the old days, there was definitely a greater influence before the cross. There was a greater influence of the devil in the life of the Gentiles, and that's why today the conversation was about baptism, and how in the rites of baptism in the Coptic Church, if you open Coptic Reader, if you take a look at the actual text, we see how the Church does an exorcism in baptism, and we see how the Church in the litany of the catechumens always prays for the catechumens and asks God that all these things and their prior life before coming to know Christ completely be abolished. In the prayers of the baptism, in multiple places, we completely pray for the departure of this person and never his return back to his old ways, the ways that were before, because the Church was dealing with a community and a culture that had a community that was ultimately Gentiles that were coming into the world, and a world that was led astray by the demons, as it says here. Let's move on. They know nothing of themselves, but like thieves, they get to know from others what they get to know from others, they pass on and guess rather than foretell things. As we say, it's an assumption. Therefore, if sometimes they speak the truth, let no one marvel at them for this. For experienced physicians also, since they see the same malady in different people, often foretell what it is, right, by simple experience, for making it out by their acquaintance with it. Pilots too, I don't know what kind of pilots he's talking about, definitely not aircrafts, but pilots too and farmers, from their familiarity with the weather, perhaps maybe pilots for sea vessels, tell at a glance the state of the atmosphere and forecast whether it will be stormy or fine. And no one would say that they do this by inspiration. When someone, especially when an experienced person, takes a look at the weather or the sky and says it's going to rain later today, or it's going to be, sunny tomorrow, they simply do this not because of some sort of gift, but because of experience and kind of almost being trained, discipline, not by inspiration, but through experience here and practice, as we're saying. So if the demons sometimes do the same guesswork, let no one wonder at it or heed it. For what use to the hearers is it to know from them, from the demons, what is going to happen before the time? What point is it really to know a couple of days in advance? Or what concern have we to know such things, even if the knowledge be true? For it is not productive of virtue, nor is it any token of goodness. For none of us is judged by what he knows not, and no one is called blessed because he has learning and knowledge. But each one will be called to judgment in these points, whether he have kept the faith and truly observed the commandments. It's quite beautiful. Moving on, this next paragraph says, wherefore there is no need to set much value on these things, nor for the sake of them, what are those things? No need to set any value in those things, which is knowing the future, what's going to happen in the future, so on and so forth. So there's no need to set any value on those things, much value on those things, nor for the sake of them to practice a life of discipline and labor, but that living well we may please God. We should focus on living well to please God. And we neither ought to pray to know the future, nor to ask for it as the reward of our discipline. For our prayers should be that the Lord may be our fellow helper for victory over the devil. Of course, he's speaking to monks, but then again, the advice is the same to us. Do not worry, do not concentrate, do not focus, do not waste time on knowing what is going to happen in the future, because as he says, what is the point? And if even once we have a desire to know the future, let us be pure in mind. For I believe that if a soul is perfectly pure in it and in its natural state, it is able, being clear-sighted, to see more and further than the demons. For it has the Lord who reveals to it, like the soul of Elisha, which saw what was done by Gehazi and beheld the host standing on the side. This story is when the king of Syria sent people because he was sick and tired of Elisha. Why was he sick and tired of Elisha? Because he felt like there was a mole in his army. There was an insider telling Elisha what was going on. Because everywhere he goes, Elisha already knows where he's going, and he tells his king. And he felt like there was a traitor among him. And so when they all told him, no, we're not traitors, he sent an army to Elisha. So Gehazi, the poor servant, wakes up, he sees an army coming, and it just both of them. So he goes to Elisha and he says, you're not going to believe it, there's a whole army outside. And Elisha says, okay, so? And he says, Now I'm going to pray that God may open your eyes, and you will behold that there's also another army above, and much, much bigger, and much, much mightier, and much, much stronger. And of course, as we read last week, one angel of the Lord was able to, by himself, wipe out 185,000 people. And this is now an army of angels, not just one. And beheld the host standing on its side. Okay, so let me just duplicate this because it's too small. All right. And this is where I cut it. There we go. When therefore they come by night, which is the demons, of course, to you and wish to tell you the future, or say, we are the angels, give no heed, for they lie. Yeah, even if they praise your discipline and call you blessed, hear them not, and have no dealings with them, but rather sign yourselves and your houses and pray, and you shall see them vanish. For they are cowards and greatly fear the sign of the Lord's cross. Since of a truth in it the Saviour stripped them, and made an example of them. But if they shamelessly stand their ground, capering and changing their forms of appearance, fear them not, nor shrink nor heed them, as though they were good spirits. For the presence either of the good or evil by the help of God can easily be distinguished. Now I guess we're going to later on, as we said, go over how to distinguish between the presence of good and the presence of evil. So he continues in the same paragraph. He says, the vision of the holy ones is not fraught with distraction, for they will not strive nor cry, nor shall anyone hear their voice. But it comes so quietly and gently. This is the vision of the holy ones. It comes quietly, gently, that immediately joy, gladness, and courage arise in the soul. For the Lord, who is our joy, is with them, and the power of God the Father. And the thoughts of the soul remain unruffled and undisturbed, so that it, enlightened, as it were, with rays, beholds by itself those who appear. For the love of what is divine and of the things to come possesses it, and willingly it would be wholly joined with them if it could depart along with them. But if being men, some fear the vision of the good, those who appear immediately take fear away, as Gabriel did in the case of Zacharias, and as the angel did who appeared to the women at the holy sepulchre, and as he did who said to the shepherds in the gospel, fear not. For their fear arose not from timidity, but from the recognition of the presence of superior beings. Such then is the nature of the visions of the Holy One. So this is actually very interesting. It's quite beautiful how the teaching dates back to the time of St. Athanasius. So the teaching has always been, how do we know? What's the difference? The difference has always been in peace, in inner peace. That's the difference. The difference has always been in the feelings of peace and joy, even if the apparition is bringing bad news somehow, right? It's still a vision of a holy one, brings about with it, as we say here, quiet, gentle, serenity, gladness, joy, and courage, right? It's an uplifting experience no matter what. And here he brings about, for example, the angels that say, fear not. Okay, well, did the people fear? Or he brings the account from Luke, the Gospel of Luke chapter 2, Gabriel appearing to Zacharias. Okay, and so was he afraid? Right, and he says that fear is different from being afraid. Fear, is still being accompanied by peace, is quite different from, a soul that is disturbed on the inside because of something that is inherently evil. All right, let's move on to chapter 36. but the inroad and the display of the evil spirits is fraught with confusion. Now, the opposite is also very true, and it's pretty much the opposite. So the opposite is going to now not going to have peace, not going to have serenity, not going to have any of those things, but it's going to have confusion, sounds, cryings, disturbance, so on and so forth. For which arise fear in the heart, tumult and confusion of thought, dejection, hatred towards them who live a life of discipline, indifference, grief, remembrance of king's folk, and fear of death, and finally desire of evil things, disregard of virtue, and unsettled habits. Whenever therefore you have seen aught and are afraid, if your fear is immediately taken away, and in place of it comes joy unspeakable, cheerfulness, courage, renewed strength, calmness of thought, and all those I named before, boldness and love towards God, take courage and pray. For joy and a settled state of soul show the holiness of him who is present. Thus Abraham, beholding the Lord, rejoiced. So also John, at the voice of Mary, the God-bearer, leaped for gladness. But if at the appearance of any there is confusion, knocking without worldly display, threats of death, and the other things which I have already mentioned, no, it is an onslaught of evil spirits. So kind of very beautifully putting how shall we know when how shall we know when something is truly from evil, or something that is righteous, or something that is holy. All right, 37 says, and let this also be a token for you. Whenever the soul remains fearful, there is a presence of the enemies. For the demons do not take away the fear of their presence, as the great archangel Gabriel did for Mary and Zacharias, and as he did who appeared to the women at the tomb. But rather, whenever they see men afraid, they increase their delusions, that men may be terrified the more, and at last, attacking, they mock them, saying, fall down and worship. Thus they deceived the Greeks, and thus they were considered gods, falsely so called. But the Lord did not suffer us to be deceived by the devil, for he rebuked him whenever he framed such delusions against him, saying, get behind me, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only you shall serve. And more, therefore, let the deceiver be despised by us, for what the Lord has said, this for our sakes he has done, that the demons hearing like words from us may be put to flight through the Lord, who rebuked them in those words. Paragraph 38 says, and it is not fitting to boast at the casting forth of the demons, nor to be uplifted by the healing of diseases, nor is it fitting that he who casts out devils should alone be highly esteemed, while he who casts them not should be considered naught. So he's talking about the gift of being able to cast out demons. And he's saying it should not be something to be taken pride in, or something to be desired, or to be kind of mourned not having that gift. Let a man learn the discipline of each one, and either imitate, rival, or correct it. For the workings of signs is not ours, but the Savior's work. And so he said to his disciples, rejoice, not that the demons are subject to you, but that your names are written in the heavens. For the fact that our names are written in heaven is a proof of our virtuous life. But to cast out demons is a favor of the Savior who granted it. Wherefore, to those who boasted in signs, but not in virtue, the Lord said, in your name did we cast out demons, and in your name did we do many mighty works. And sadly, Christ answers, verily I say unto you, I do not know you. I know you not. And the Lord knows not the ways of the wicked. But we ought always to pray, as I said above, that we may receive the gift of the discerning spirits, that as it is written, you may not believe every spirit. You guys remember in, I think it was in the book of Acts, the 7 sons of Sceva also arose, and they began to cast out demons with the name of Christ. And so the demons said, well, hold on, Christ I know, Peter I know, I don't know you guys. And they overpowered them, right? And so here he completely recounts, and he says 2 things. Number 1, rejoice that not that the demons were subject to you, but that your names are written in heaven. And number 2, when people came and said, we cast out demons in your name, he says, I do not know you. Moving on to paragraph 39. All right, paragraph 39 says, let me cut it here so we can see a little better. I should have liked to speak no further and to say nothing from my own prompting, satisfied with what I have said, but lest you should think that I speak at random and believe that I detail these things without experience or truth. Of course, here this is gold. Everything we've been talking about is gold. Because why is it gold? Because it actually comes from a man who is experienced. He, as we said before, we saw his early life. As he was tormented, and if you were with me 2 weeks ago, we spoke about how the demons really overpowered St. Anthony, and they cut his body, and he was laying on the floor, unable to move, right? And then they brought him to the nearby church, and the people came around him, and they all, sat around him, and they didn't know if he was going to make it throughout the night. And then, he got courage, and he kind of motioned over to his friend that brought him, and he told him, take me back to the tomb. And so he took him back, right? We talked before about how people would come and they would hear voices, many voices attacking and debating and being there with him. So Saint Anthony is truly experienced. This is gold because it comes from experience of a holy man who has not only he has tested all things, he has experienced God, he experienced his might, he experienced his help, and as God said, I have now given you help from this point on. I have seen you, I have been there, I have given you help, I have given you power. And then he says, whenever we win, we continue in our discipline and we never falter. So here he says, I should not have liked to speak no further, say nothing of my own prompting, satisfied with what I have said, but lest you should think that I speak at random and believe that I detail these things without experience or truth. For this cause, even though I should become as a fool, yet the Lord who hears knows the clearness of my conscience, that it is not for my own sake, but on account of your affection towards me, and at your petition, that I again tell what I saw of the practices of the evil spirits. How often have they called me blessed, and I have cursed them in the name of the Lord? How often they have predicted the rising of the river, and I answered them, what you have to do with it. And once they came threatening and surrounded me like soldiers in full armor. And another time they filled the house with horses, wild beasts, creeping things, and I sang, some in chariots and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord. And the prayers they were turned to flight by the Lord. This is paragraph 39, and let's continue the second half of this paragraph right here. Once they came in darkness, bearing the appearance of a light, and said, we have come to give you light, Anthony. But I closed my eyes and prayed, and immediately the light of the wicked ones was quenched. And a few months later, they came as though singing psalms and babbling the words of Scripture. But I, like a deaf man, heard not. Once they shook the cell with an earthquake. But I continued praying with unshaken heart, and after this they came again, making noises and whistling and dancing. But as I prayed, I lay singing psalms to myself. They immediately began to lament and weep, and if their strength had failed them, but I gave glory to the Lord, and had brought down and made an example of their daring and madness. So finally, let's wrap up with paragraph 40. So here, once a demon exceeding high appeared with a pomp, and dared to say, I am the power of God, and I am providence. What do you wish that I shall give you? But I then so much the more breathed upon him, and spoke the name of Christ, and set about to smile him. And I seemed to have smitten him, and forthwith he, big as he was, together with all his demons, disappeared at the name of Christ. Another time, while I was fasting, he came full of craft under the semblance of a monk, and with what seemed to be loaves, and gave me counsel, saying, Eat and cease from thy many labors. Thou also art a man, and art like to fall sick. But I, perceiving his device, rose up to pray, and endured it not, for he departed, and through the door there seemed to go out, as it were, smoke. How often in the desert has he displayed with resembled gold, that I should only touch it and look on it, but I sang psalms against it, and he vanquished away. Often they would beat me with stripes, and I repeated again and again, Nothing shall separate me from the love of Christ. And at this they rather fell to bearing one another, nor was it that I stayed them and destroyed their power, but it was the Lord who said, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from the heavens. And I, children mindful of the apostles' word, transferred this to myself, that you may learn not to faint in discipline, nor to fear the devil, nor the delusions of the demons. God willing, when we're done with this part about the devil, we'll wrap it up in a very nice, concise document or some sort of a format explaining exactly all the things, all the tricks, all the ways, all the moods, everything, the apparitions, and everything together. A beautiful topic, something perhaps that is not spoken about often, but a beautiful journey. We'll continue, God willing, covering the life of St. Anthony next week until we are done with it. God willing, tomorrow is the feast or the fast of St. Jonah, and the Ninevites. Praying that all of us offer an acceptable fast to the Lord. Accompanying with prayer, we ask God to end this pandemic. We ask God to intervene in our lives, O Lord, specifically in all the legislature that is being pushed forward now and forever, God willing. May God grant us to live unto Him, and glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.